Thank you for coming to this presentation of my mom's artwork, the artwork of Tzporah Breitman Lee, specifically her soul sketches. I hope you visit the website. I want to thank Shulamis, Chayesora, and Rena, and everyone that was responsible for making this event possible. This presentation is dedicated in loving memory Le'ilu Nishmat Tzipora Bat Alexander Ziskin, Aleh Shalom. Circa 1933, the art critic Leon Dabo stated, "No painter will go on unless he has an audience. It may be small, 1, 2, or 3, but he has got to have that." And that's the idea of this presentation, to bring my mom's artwork to life. But before I display the artwork, I should introduce you to the artist and the evolution of her art. Tzporah was born into a very Orthodox Jewish family, and she displayed artistic musical talent at a very young age. She was very young when she started choreographing her own dances, and when guests would come to the house, she would perform in front of the guests with her own creations. And here we have her elementary school graduation photo, in the dress here she designed and created herself. It was a very musical family. My grandfather was a cantor. He was a rather well-known cantor in Borough Park, Brooklyn. But when my mom was small, they lived in Coney Island, and my grandparents had a kosher delicatessen. And my grandfather would rehearse with his choir in the restaurant very often, and the neighbors would come and listen. My mom was in the choir, and so were my uncles. It's a very musical family, not only cantorial music, but classical and operatic music. And my grandmother made sure that little Tzporah would have piano lessons, even though it was financially difficult for the family. It was my aunt, my great aunt, Aunt Ray Needleman, who was a writer, and she was also supervised a floor in the Labor Department of Washington, D.C. She was very much into the modern day world. She saw her niece's talent for art, and she was the one that introduced her to oil painting and bought her first art tool kit. We have my mom playing the piano, and over the piano is one of her paintings of two flutists from front and back perspective. The black and white photographs of the paintings you'll see are unfortunately lost. This is the only remnant I have of them, but you could sort of get an idea of the painting here. And that's all the black and white photographs in this presentation are unfortunately, the paintings are lost. This is Tzporah in later years playing the guitar near her easel, and you could just imagine who that is on the sketch there. Yes, it's yours truly, because since I was available, I was a rather frequent subject for her sketches and her paintings. Now, as my mom became more involved in oil painting and meeting artists, she started going to the social gatherings of artistic social gatherings of Professor Arnold Hoffman. He was a well-known painter of anti-Nazi themes. Born in Odessa, Russia, he was not Jewish, but his wife Laura was, and they fled Europe because of the Holocaust. My mom told me there was a beautiful painting he had done of Jews being herded into cattle cars. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any samples of his Holocaust paintings, but I just settled with these two paintings to give you an idea of his work. This is not a self-portrait, but I thought it was a wonderful, masterful capture of whoever the subject was, a personality. You could feel the expression there. And you could see a Brooklyn Bridge. You could feel the rough water, the way it's rocking about, and the puffs of smoke. Oh, my mom said that Professor Hoffman taught not only how to paint, but also the philosophy of art. One of the things I distinctly remember her telling me about was to paint with passion. He used to say, you must paint with passion. And not only painting, but that applies to all facets of life. And I even incorporate that into my library skill sessions. I tell the students, when you have to write a paper, try to pick a topic that you like, because you'll get involved in it and you'll write a better paper. For school, my mom went to the Met, which was the affectionate name for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. I don't mean she took classes. I meant that she was a regular fixture at the Met. She would come every day and study the paintings, mostly the old masters, and all the guards knew her because she would come every single day. There was one period of time that for some reason, I don't remember what the reason was, she didn't come for a while. When she did show up, she said the guards all looked at her as if she was a ghost. They said, "We thought you died," because she was over there every day, and all of a sudden she wasn't there. Another interesting story she told me about the Met was during World War II, there would be air raid sirens. And one time she was in the museum, and there was air raid siren, and all the visitors to the museum had to walk down this long flight of marbles. I think they were marble steps, beautiful steps, down to the bottom of the way down underneath the museum. And there was this storage area of beautiful treasures that the public usually never saw. And this was used as an air raid shelter. Now, this was my mom's favorite painter, Rembrandt van Rijn, who was Dutch, 1606 to 1669. He was one of the old masters who were European painters from 1300 to 1800. This painting is, if is not most famous painting, it's one of his most famous paintings, called The Night Watch. It's not at the Met, it's in the Rijksmuseum Museum, which is the National Museum of the Netherlands. If we look at this painting from 21st century perspective, we don't think there's anything special about it. However, at the time, it was a very revolutionary painting. At that time, if an aristocrat or a nobleman wanted his portrait done, of course, there was no photography then, he would commission a painter to do his portrait. And everything would be well posed and arranged. And of course, the subject in the painting looked much more prettier or handsome than real life. But basically, the pose was very, very stiff. And let's say if the painter was commissioned to do a scene of soldiers, everything would be regimented and not really any action there. Now, if we look at the Night Watch, we see what's going on here. There's a lot going on. You see these two men, they're walking and they're gesturing in the middle of the painting here. There's one man is loading his rifle, somebody else is playing a drum, somebody else is waving a flag. There's a lot of action here. It's not stiff or regimented at all. Another well-known feature of Rembrandt's paintings was chiaroscuro, which is an Italian word meaning light and dark. In art, it refers to the use of light and dark elements to create a sense of volume and depth. So if we look at the Night Watch again, we see that some areas are very light and some lit up and some sections are very dark. And notice the three men towards what we would call the back of the scene in the painting. The fact that they're surrounded by dark and they're lit up makes your eye sort of travel. It makes your eye sort of travel to the back of the painting. And this idea of highlighting and shading emphasizes certain sections of the painting. It creates a sense of depth and volume. Another thing that my mom taught me about art was the idea of balance. So if any of you have taken chemistry or math, you know about balancing an equation. Well, it's similarly in art. Look at the painting again, and you see that soldier in the red uniform, how he's loading his gun. Well, notice the rifle is exactly parallel to that flag. And you see some other poles there, they're also all parallel. Then there's a spear that is at right angles to those poles. And the drum is just about parallel to that spear. So, and then there's a rifle to the right. So there's a lot of balance here, a lot of geometry going on. So there are two things. There's action and there's a lot of geometry and balance here. This is one of Tzporah's earliest paintings. You could see it's well worn. I do have this painting. You could almost count the bristles on the brushes. The shadow is very distinct. It's almost photographic. You almost feel as if you could pick up one of those brushes out of the vase. But it's also a little bit stiff, or maybe not quite flat, but there's something that's a little, well, I guess I'm using the word stiff about it. It's not moving, not really, although it's very, very detailed and almost like a photograph. And you'll see what I mean when I talk about movement. Now, this painting is from 1953. And notice that it's not so detailed, but from the brushstrokes, you could actually feel as if the water is rippling. You could feel the light on the rippling waves. And there's a calmness about it. You really have a certain sensation about it. There's movement there. I also had a lot of fun trying to figure out which bridges these were that my mom had seen from, they were superimposed. I knew that she lived on the east side, so I figured it was the East River. And I did find out this is the Triborough RFK Bridge in the foreground, and in the back is the Hellgate Bridge. So you could see this concave and convex superposition here, which is a very, very interesting geometry. And this is a portrait of Jacob Epstein's niece. Jacob Epstein was a very well-known sculptor. It's oils on just mere cardboard. And look at the hands and look at the blouse. It's not worked out at all, not detailed at all, but look at the face. The artist captured the glimmer in the eye, certain expression that the whole thing is alive. This is another still life. This is still life in oils. Now, you unfortunately, you could see too much of the shadows of the brushstrokes because that was from the light of the cell phone. That's one of the difficulties I ran into. But you could see from the brushstrokes, it's very free. One of the common phrases my mom would teach me, she said, don't be afraid of the brush, just to be free. And don't you feel as if those apples, as if the paper bag just ripped open and those apples just poured out right now? Even though it's a still life, it has a lot of movement and life to it. As my mom became more involved in the art world, she started to have her own artistic gatherings, musicians, artists, intellectuals, and this was one of her frequent guests was Avalnus Jerry Widoff. And here we see a painting. Of course, it's, again, this painting is lost. This is the only remnant I have of it, this black and white photo, which is not very clear. But she painted Jerry Widoff as he was playing the violin. And this was another frequent guest, Helen Domain. She was a pianist. I think she was French. And here she's admiring the sculpture of her hands created as she was playing. So as Helen Domain was playing the piano, my mom sculpted her hands. And here is a close-up of the hands. I don't have this sculpture, unfortunately. Hands are very difficult to capture, whether you're drawing or painting or sculpting. Here's a still life. Now the colors, the colored photographs of the paintings you're going to see are not true to the original paintings. Unfortunately, when I took the photographs, the colors became transmuted from the cell phone into the photograph, and then from the photograph to the PowerPoint. But this is sort of an approximation of the actual colors of the painting, and you just feel as if those stems they were just hanging, and as if the petals just fell off. And this one is called the Zaidi, which is Yiddish for grandfather. And a common motif in my mom's Judaica paintings is the idea of chinuch, transmitting from one generation to the next, the tradition, the Masorah. So we see the grandfather, he's lovingly teaching his grandson here. The brushstrokes are very soft, which evokes a feeling of affection and tenderness. And look at the fur on the stromal on the hat, the Hasidic hat. It almost looks as if it's rotating. This probably harks back to my my mom's memories of her own grandfather, who was very Hasidish. Artist periods. Showing you my mom's paintings here was not only to introduce you to her art, but also to contrast with the soul sketches that I'm going to show you, introduce you to very soon. Artists sometimes go into periods where they're concentrated on with a certain color or a certain technique or style. And here's a very well-known example. Pablo Picasso, not exactly my mom's most favorite painter or my most favorite painter, but very good example here. We have Woman in a Blue Plumed Hat, done in 1901, from his blue period. Very calm, tranquil, of course, in lovely blues, and we have this very peaceful expression of the lady here. So it's a wonderful piece. Then we skip to 1938, 1941, and these are also portraits of women in hats, but completely different. So very good example of how painters will go into different periods. Now I'm going to show you, as an example of from my mom's work, 4 different interpretations of Moses that she did. This one, I don't know how old this was. It was an oil painting. The eyes are very penetrating and very deep, very prophetic, very strong, dynamic. And here we have on the right, this painting was done in the 1990s. And notice that my mom painted Moses with the tefillin shel rosh, the tefillin of the head tefillin. I have this painting, and she also did a painting of Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, also with tefillin shel rosh, which I also have that painting. On the right is a pastel sketch. Also, as you could see, a different technique. And Moses is lovingly holding the luchos, and he has this wonderful smiling expression on his face that he's so grateful to Hashem for receiving the luchos, the tablets. And here's the first soul sketch I'm showing you. As you can see, this skull sketch is a completely different style and technique than the other representations of Moses. And as you'll see, the coloring is my coloring, but the soul sketches are a completely different type of technique than my mother's other work. The soul sketches. Let's get into the soul sketches. The soul sketches are all black and white sketches in pencil. They were actually preliminaries for oil paintings, like a blueprint. So as we have one example here, this one was entitled Israel. So she would have the soul sketch. Then on the bottom, she would have the name. And then to the lower right, she would sign it, and then have the date she completed it. And then the lower left side, she would have the color she intended to use for the oil paintings. Now, I haven't shown here, but she would also record this series, what number in the soul sketch series each piece was. But I'm not showing that here for space reasons. So I wanted to bring these soul sketches to life. The only way I could see to do it was to color them according to the artist's intended colors. We go back to the piece here, Israel. So the intended colors were reds, yellows, pinks, whites, blues, and grays. Well, the problem I had was this is not a paint by number set. So we're on the black and white where I place each color. And it's an oil paint. It was meant to be for an oil painting. Those are expensive, but they also require a great deal of skill and experience, which I didn't have. Other problems, it was an ethical problem, disrespect to the artist's original intent. I couldn't possibly do it justice because, first of all, I didn't know where the colors would be on each, where the colors were intended to go on each sketch, and I wouldn't even be using oil painting, so it could never capture the majesty that my mother intended. And also the fact that this was my mother's work also made it even more difficult to decide whether to do this or not. When I did decide to do it, I was photographing with a cell phone, which caused a lot of problems. There was glare, there was distortion, and some of the sketches were warped from age. And also, when you use a certain technique of pencil on paper, it already warps the paper. And the warping made the glare more apparent. It was very difficult. Which mediums to use? I decided everything from crayon to colored markers to Microsoft Paint. The format I decided to use was to display them on a website, which I hope you will eventually look at. Speaking about oil painting, what's so superior about oil painting is that it retains the brush stroke. So recall when I was talking about freedom, and you could see the freedom in the brush strokes. That's what oil painting does. It allows you to be more expressive, and also it allows a multitude of different types of techniques. And also it allows a large range of colors. And with this large range of colors, you could make lots of variations, beautiful variations of colors. I remember my mom told me one time one of her painter friends came. She was in the middle of mixing a color on her palette, and he said, "Where did you get that color? How did you mix that color?" And it's sort of like chefs; they don't necessarily divulge their recipes, so painters don't necessarily divulge how they mix their paints. And we see here a self-portrait of Rembrandt here. So here are 4 different interpretations I did of Israel, using the same recipe of colors, so to speak, the same formula of colors, but completely different results. Interpretations. This for the soul sketches. This happens to be very abstract. Oh, you see these faces floating. Some of them are floating out of the Torah scroll. Could these be representing souls from previous generations? Maybe the souls from the Torah scroll represent from the Tanakh, from the Bible, from Jewish history. The faces are showing expressions of pain, perhaps mirroring the persecution throughout the generations. Again, you have the theme of chinuch, transmitting Torah to the next generation, a common theme in my mom's Judaica artwork. The main figure obviously represents Israel, and he's transmitting the Masorah, the tradition, to the boy, who has a very bewildered, innocent expression looking up with one round eye. And unusually, the tefillin here is on the right arm, which is unusual because tefillin is usually on the left arm, but I guess this was maybe probably symbolic, had a different symbolism there. Now, here are some common features of the soul sketches. They were all done in 1956. There's a dark sky. Could be a play of light and dark. There's often an orb in the background. The faces are pear-shaped. The eyes are almond-shaped. Sometimes there may only be one eye, and the facial expressions are implied because there's not much to the face there. There are no really features. There are hardly any features. So you're going to see that the facial expressions are implied. There might be elongation of the bodies or limbs. So this piece, Judaism, we see here some of the common features: a dark sky, an orb in the background, the face is pear-shaped, there's one almond-shaped eye. And notice the elongation of the bodies. Now, the 2 faces are looking up, so you already have a feeling of trying to ascend to heaven. There's a feeling of looking up towards heaven, towards Hashem. And if you look at the bodies, you see they're tall and thin. It's sort of like an elongation. This accentuates the feeling of trying to aspire heavenward, which is a little reminiscent, l'havdil, of Gothic architecture, where you have these flying buttresses and vaulted ceilings to give the effect of trying to reach heavenward. If we're talking about balance, notice the father is looking to the right, the son is looking to the left, and notice that the arm is very parallel to the boy's head. And if we look at the prayer shawl, the tallis, notice that on the left side, you almost feel as if that tallis is falling off. So it gives you sort of a pulling feeling down towards the left. To counterbalance that, look at the tallis on the right side is is almost touching the floor, so that sort of pulling it, it's counterbalancing it. And I have this stick diagram to sort of give you an idea of the geometry going on here. And again, the repeated motif of chinuch, Jewish education, the essence of Judaism, is imparting the Masorah, or tradition, to the next generation. This piece is entitled "The Dead Don't Die." There were no colors specified, so I had to use my own imagination. Take a few seconds and look at the artwork, and how do you relate something in the artwork? There's a feature here in the artwork that very much relates to the title. Well, if you look closely, where is the light coming from? There's no orb in the sky. If you look, you see that the light is emanating from the grave. And this gives the idea that the soul survives. The dead don't die. So here you have a sort of the symbolism of light and dark. And indeed, in Judaism, it's believed that, God forbid, when somebody passes away, the neshama, the soul, remains over the grave for a short period of time. Since this was done in 1956 and my grandmother died in 1954, my mom was still grieving. So this is obviously a reflection of that mourning period. I thought this was rather interesting. This one on the left is called Supplication. And when I was going through my mom's sketches, newsprint paper, I noticed this and I said, wow, that looks the same pose. This was done many years later, possibly, I don't know, the 60s or 70s, many years later, and it's the same type of position as the soul sketch of Supplication. Most of the soul sketches can be classified into certain categories, which is how I arrange it on the website. So I'm going to give you some selections here. We'll first start with religious themes. Here we have the finding of the infant Moses. This was number 62 in the series. Oh, I have to add that there were 90 soul sketches altogether. So we have one version here, and here's the original, black and white on the left. And here we have another version, quite different here, sort of shimmering light. This one, Moses in the Burning Bush, was 61. It was done actually right before the finding of the infant Moses. When you look at the black and white soul sketch, you see a lot of those white lines in the background. That was not part of the sketch. What that actually was warping. And when I took the photograph, it was there was glare on the warp of the pages and created those white lines, which made it also more difficult for me to decipher where did one line end and where did another line begin. But I sort of figured it out. Here we have one interpretation, and here are two more interpretations. Here we have Samson, number 52 in the series, and he's destroying Gaza. Here we have another version. The arts. Now, just take a look. This one is called Night Song, number 42. Just take a look and see if there's anything unusual about this. You might think about something that we discussed in another one of the soul sketches. Look closely. Well, if you haven't spotted it yet, notice that his right hand, how is it lit up? That should actually be dark. You look up, the inside of his hand is light and his lap is all lit up. So where's the light coming from? It's coming from the flute. It seems to be coming from the music. So we have another play of light and dark. I love this one. This is called Symbol Player. And many of the figures in the soul sketches are in costumes or garbs either from the Middle East or ancient civilizations. This one is Night Song. This one is very simple, but it's also very geometric. You feel, notice that the arm is elongated, which sort of accentuates the harp. The harp is, you know, almost like a V there. The harp is leaning towards the left, and her body is arched towards the right, which causes a balance. Now, this one is music. We have a lot going on here. Notice that the flute is pointing up to the left. Her hair is arching up to the right, and her body is arched to the right. And we have a lot of parallel lines and musical notes flying parallel lines and intersecting lines, which also gives a feeling as if the music is flying in the air with all these musical notes and a lot of geometry going here also. Field workers. Now, these are the apple pickers. This was only number 11 in the series. If you take a look here, and if you remember some of the common features I mentioned about the soul sketches, what do you see that's a little bit unusual here? If you notice, you see that face with the one eye in the middle. It has a mouth. The mouth could also be a leaf. And you look at her at the branch right above her face. There's a hole in the branch. It almost looks, it has the same shape as the eye. So it gives you the sensation as if you're looking through these people, as if when you're looking at people through a tree and the leaves are obstructing your vision. So you have that feeling here also. It's also a little bit abstract, but a very, very interesting piece. This one is May, number 15 in the series. And for some reason, it always makes me think of Pesach cleaning, even though it's entitled May. And look at her hair, the way it's curling, and her face is, let's see, it's pointing in one direction. And then you see her skirt is blowing in the other direction and her arms in the other direction, giving it a balance. But look how the skirt is curving to the right. And then you see the ground, the curvature of the ground, those curves, that circular motion that really accentuates the feeling of the wind. You actually feel as if the wind is blowing those leaves. So there's a lot of simplicity here, but a lot going on just by the geometry. And this one is called Pickers. Notice that the leaves are pointing to the right. They're sort of almost diamond shaped. And notice the pointed faces. They're oriented in the opposite direction. A lot of diagonals here. If you look at the woman's hands and her arms, it creates sort of a diamond shape. Exotic lands and cultures. Here you have some Eskimos. This is Northern Sup, number 19 in the series. You can almost feel these Eskimos warming by the warmth of the fire, by the light of the fire, getting ready to have their fish that they just caught. And this lovely lady is entitled Africa. Now, her long neck was not a figment of my mom's imagination. There are actually tribes in Africa and other parts of the world where the women wear these neck rings, and it gives the appearance, it either elongates or gives the appearance that the necks are elongated, and this was a sign of beauty. So again, this lovely lady is Africa. The American Indian, number 18 in this series. Now, there's a lot of movement here, similar to the soul sketch that we saw of May about those curves. So let your eye start on that bow, the bow that he's holding, and your eye travels to the left and then down the headdress, and then keep going down the edge of the headdress. And then where does the headdress? The headdress curves to the right. His right arm and hand is curving to the right. His foot is pointing up, and then the other foot is up. So what does that give you? It gives you a feeling of a circle. Your eyes are traveling in a circle, and this gives the impression of movement. It actually accentuates the feeling that he's actually dancing. Strange and celestial beings. This one is called the Medusa. If you're not up on your Greek mythology, the Medusa was a lady with snakes instead of hair. And to contrast with that, we have this sweet piece called Morning, where this young girl is combing her hair. She just woke up and blossomed out of a flower, and she's combing her hair. Motherhood. This one is actually entitled Motherhood. Very playful piece showing women with their children, very happy. This is entitled Mother and Child. And when I mentioned about facial expressions being implied, look at the mother's face. It's only the two almond-shaped eyes and a line representing a nose. There's no mouth, but look at the tilt of the head, and don't you feel that loving expression and the affection that the mother is showing to the child? You could just feel it, and it's very simple. The child's face is also not detailed, but you could feel the love that the child is sending to the mother also. And notice that the mother's arm is very long, is elongated here to give the feeling of maternal protection. Sports. This one was a little unusual because only two colors were specified, blues and purples. It's called high jumper. This one, my mom obviously had watched some boxing matches because this one is called clinch, which is when boxers get into this unusual position. They're sort of huddled. I guess they're avoiding a punch, whatever. So it's called clinch. And they're in the spotlight in the boxing ring. The white of the mouth is not their teeth. The boxers wear mouthpieces to protect their teeth. So that's what you're seeing here. And here's another version of clinch. Night. If you take a look at this one, again, very simple, geometric lines. What type of feeling does it give you? When I look at it, the path seems to be coming out of nowhere. It's curving to the right, it's curving to the left, it's curving to the right. The bodies themselves are almost swaying because they're curved. It gives you almost a feeling of swaying. It gives me the impression, it reminds me of an earthquake. Let's say the earth is moving. Maybe you're on a boat on a rocky sea. It gives a feeling of instability, that something is wrong. And here you can see this is a mother trying to comfort her children who are afraid. Something is wrong, something is not right. And the children are clinging to the mother for support. Again, you have these curves and geometry creating emotion. I love this one. This is called Night Lure. Again, you have this oriental type of motif. Evil. This one is Evil Whispers. Two ladies obviously sharing some nice juicy gossip. And what they're standing on is a very interesting design. I sort of interpreted that it might be, it reminds me of woven wool or maybe thread. So maybe it's given the impression that they're sort of weaving some sort of an evil gossip. This one is Vanity. This also was only indicated two colors, purples and blues. The two ladies admiring themselves in their mirrors. I thought we would end with something sort of happy. Clowns. This is a riding clown. This is number 60 on a horse. This one is called Harlequin. It was actually painted on cardboard canvas. My mother noted that down on this soul sketch. Cardboard canvas, 12 by 16 inches in oils. And what do you see that's very different than the other soul sketches here? Well, he has a very developed mouth, and he has eyes who actually have pupils. So this is very atypical of the soul sketches, but very happy, very good-natured type of an expression. It makes you feel good. Now, this is called the Harlequin Lovers. It was only number 3 in the series. And here we see there are eyes with pupils and mouths. As a matter of fact, there's one of the clowns has a feminine mouth and the other has apparently a masculine mouth. One is smiling, one is frowning. So it reminds you of those tragic comic faces, masks from the theater. So this is very well. You can see that the soul sketch technique within the soul sketches, the technique was evolving here, where she eventually, my mom eliminated the eyes. Yeah, the eyes are almond shaped, but eventually they end up not having pupils. There are no mouths. Everything becomes much more geometrically simple. So this is very interesting. The evolution of the soul sketches themselves. This was only number 3 again in the series. This is, I'm just going to end it off with soul sketch number 1, which was entitled Avram, the artist's husband, who was my father. It's a very interesting, very abstract, also atypical for the soul sketches, but again, the technique had not been worked out yet. We see a very simple mouth, a line, and sort of a nose just represented, and 2 eyes round. It's very abstract and very very involved, very sort of complicated piece. And also the hand, there's a hand there. It's very abstract, very interesting though. Well, folks, thanks very much for coming to this presentation. I do hope you'll visit the website, Tzporah-Breitman-Lee -A-H 1918-2008.webador.com. Enter it into your browser. If you have any questions, please contact me at my YU address, email address, or my Gmail address. Thank you very much.